that game is mostly shh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna free slaves. Oh my god, psh, you freed the slaves. Blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? Rainbows, Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, Call of Duty. All right, that's what we're doing. Like, okay,
Well, thanks for making time to chat. Really appreciate it.
of course, yeah. I've been
Yeah,
reading
yeah,
your
yeah.
stuff. I always look forward to seeing it in the inbox, and I appreciate you reaching out because I really enjoyed talking to you, and I was hoping we'd get the chance to talk more, just in general. So yeah, I'm really happy you reached out.
Yeah, no, of course. Tell me a little bit about your background. Like, how did you make your way to like games as a medium?
I told myself I'm gonna give you a full blast of my brain. You know what I mean? Like Cyclops, like fully open. Like the reality is, I rem I remember the first time I encountered video games, which is like the Super Nintendo that my neighbor had, and I grew up. I'm Haitian American. I grew up pretty much in Brooklyn in like uh, I don't want to say project. It was not an it was like a tenement building. It was like not very nice. It was like rent control building,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like and I don't know why my brain is like this, but I have very specific memories around technology, sounds, and imagery. And it makes sense considering what kind of person I am. But I remember seeing Super Nintendo and Super Mario World, and that game, the sound. I'm hearing it now, and that was so powerful for me. Um, and my first console was Sega Genesis, and I feel like since then it's been this dance of me trying to like being so in love with games as a medium and almost trying to like uh, portions of my life where I try to downplay just how important they are to me musically, visually, how I even
yeah,
perceive reality. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
that's the I answer your question.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean that's like often a challenge for artists, like to find a way to talk about the influence of games without people like making presumptions about making presumptions about your work. It's like if you say, because you don't do like game art, for example, right? So stylistically, that's not
Right.
something, or aesthetically something that you're interested in, but influence is like the way you think about like structure and form. And so it can be, I think it's a real challenge, I think, for artists to figure out how to talk about their work, to talk about games. So they use other languages, like usually deflect, or like, you talk about like, I it's funny. I have a conversation coming up with Melissa Cody, who is a who works with fabrics, indigenous woman out here in California, and does a lot of like contemporary like weaving techniques. That's like deeply inspired by like 8-bit games, like the texture and the form and color and whatnot. And so like I'll be interested to hear like from her in terms of like, well, how do you talk about your work? Because if you come out, for a contemporary art museum and tell people that games are a reference point, they make a lot of presumptions about it. So
Right.
yeah, I feel your pain. I understand.
Yeah, it's an odd connotation. I mean, I always think back to like Roger Ebert just spending years being like, it's not a thing. Your video come okay, you're back.
Okay.
Yeah, Roger Ebert spending years being it's not a thing, and I just feel like it's such a powerful medium that's just been fighting for legitimacy when it didn't have to. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
I was reading one of your articles and it was really kind of inspiring to me to think about like maybe some Swedish philosopher or someone was like to kick a ball is what you're doing in the real world, but
Oh yeah. How's it go?
to
Yeah.
score a goal happens in the game world. Scoring a goal is not even real. It's not a real
Yeah.
thing. So it's like, we have this World Cup coming up and I'm not a sports person, but the language of sports is like this thing that's understood about like I don't know, racing a lap, overtaking, touchdowns, and all of these systems that we're just really comfortable with. But like when I start talking about D&D, it's like it becomes this thing of just like,
Yeah.
we role play all day. There's games
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all around us, but the video game aspect, having this component that is doing a lot of the computing changes stuff, right?
Tell me about like your method and practice like as a painter. Just from like from a like a style standpoint. You work with like these like heavy brushstroke, strong colors.
Yeah.
Tell me about the tradition that kind of led you there.
Well, it's been an interesting journey for me. I went from being really inspired by manga and comics art and like going into college, I discovered like James Jean's work and a bunch of these other comic artists who were doing super interesting covers in like the late 2010s. And then simultaneously, I was learning about Basquiat or just becoming a Basquiat disciple. And I was like, oh,
Right.
wow, like, wow,
Yeah.
this is speaking to me. And then, similarly to video games, there were always these paintings in my home and my family's homes of like with black art you would always get like I'm trying to find a good version of this. I'm gonna give you an example. This is a great example. This is like woodblock, but you would get these images
Yeah.
that you
Yeah. Yeah.
would easily you'd be wrong to think this, but it's really easy from a Western perspective to just think of them as simple. You were like they used to call things primitive, these images primitive. The
Right.
kind of image where it's like flat if you're not paying attention and like a person's hand is as big as like a car behind them and it's so motion and color. And I remember thinking that, oh yeah, that's not as fancy or as these Batman paintings or some like, John Singer Sargent painting or whatever. And I went through this another dip where like I think after high school I was like, oh, this has been around me so often, so much, and I spent years of my Japanophile phase kind of pushing away from that, being like, I'm not like pushing away from these traditions and being like, I'm doing this. And I think in my late 20s, early 30s, I was like, oh, this has always been in my soul, and like it's okay for me to paint like this, heavy brush strokes, like you were saying. I don't see it as flat. I think to me, I'm really interested in like painting or drawing, making the foreground image as important as the background image. Like that's what I see a lot when I look at Haitian, Caribbean, Latin American painting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Why is that for you? What is it about like wanting to bring certain things? Because there's obviously like a context, right, about who belongs in the foreground and who belongs in the background. So
Yeah,
tell me about like your approach.
I think it's like ancient wisdom. I think it's stuff that like our ancestors knew, you know, 1,000 years ago that we just have to keep reminding ourselves that like the earth is important. You know what I mean? Like we're part of this thing.
Yeah,
It's not a thing you stick a hole into and dredge up. It's like you should be able to hold a leaf and be like, I'm like the leaf is me too. Like we're all kind of. I'm wearing a floral shirt because I really like that. It speaks to something super deep in me. Um, and like if you pay attention to some of these paintings, you could see a hurricane and be like, that's also a part of us. Like the goat that's like chilling in the painting is also a part is in the environment, and it's back to the game thing. I think it also flies in the face of this idea of I click this thing and my character moves here and I move there, or even controlling a character. Because like now we're getting into some weird shit that I would love to play with at some point. Like
yeah,
the thing of what does it mean to even hold this controller and control someone? Um, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I understand what you're saying. Like, yeah, was there like a moment for you as an artist? Like, was there a painting that like jumped out at you that really like changed your perspective? I mean, you mentioned Basquiat. I don't know. Is there a particular like work from him that was like, oh, okay, I think this is a place that I want to go and explore.
I think I think his work is like, yeah, the background elements are saying stuff. I remember he would talk about Cy Twombly being an influence. I remember looking at Cy Twombly's work and be like, I don't get this shit. But like, but now I'm like, oh, there's stuff here. My
Yeah.
favorite Basquiat painting is Glenn, or well, maybe a second favorite. My first one was probably Riding with Death, but I saw in person, I think at the MoMA, and seeing all these sort of Xeroxed images, I I noticed in my head what it's a Basquiat painting is like. I have a cursor and I'm just selecting and I can right click, and if you could imagine right clicking on an element of a Basquiat painting, what does that menu look like? It's
Mm.
so much stuff. It's there's so much going on, and pretty much any element you click is going to give you sound, video, weird shit. And so I think Glenn is maybe the best example of that. But that's the first one I could think of. But like there have been a lot of paintings like that have made me sort of think like, okay, maybe I've been looking at this stuff kind of wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Did you uh did you grow up in an artistic family? Was were the arts like a natural place for you to go?
No, my I have very like uh conservative Christian, super working class. I'm first generation American, and drawing for me was always like, yeah, I don't come from an artistic family. I come from a family of like merchants. I guess they're like business people and merchants back in Haiti. Um, but like expressing oneself, like there, like I had maybe an uncle who was a painter and gave it up when he was like 15 or something. But it
Right.
was very much my thing, and I was rarely, if ever, like praised for it or even barely acknowledged. It was like, oh yeah, that's a thing you do, and it's like okay, which I think is kind of, in hindsight, I think it was kind of good for me to kind of just be like, I'm completely forging my own
Mm.
thing.
Did you like spend summers in Haiti? I know that's not like uncommon for like Caribbean folks to, do summers or see family. Obviously it's, much more challenging now, but like
Yeah, I went two times. I went in '99 for 2 weeks where I played. Um, I had Pokemon Yellow on my Game Boy Color in playing that in Haiti, and then I went in. I think it was 2018. Um, so yeah, very very different. And I was
yeah, very
bringing my
different.
aunt there was like slowly, like she was like early onset dementia. That was like a very different kind of trip. So those are two times I went. It was kind of a threat. Like going to Haiti was like, it was kind of like don't like you like we're gonna send you back kind of thing. It was like we're gonna just drop you there, if you don't behave, which is a weird thing, right? To be like threatened with your ancestry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like ostensibly, like the place you're from should be like you should it should generate like feelings of like longing and
Right.
excitement
No,
and
please.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Not like fear. I mean, I had that experience with Texas. I didn't grow up there, but my family's there. My grandfather would he came a couple times, and it's kind of a similar thing. Like my grandfather's like a pretty strict person, so he still is. He's 94 at this point, so still like everything's super buttoned up. But that was like a threat for my parents. It's like if you just do another summer with Popo, like that was I had more than enough. It was enough to it's like I don't I don't want that smoke.
Uh, I don't imagine
um,
you out there like cattle ranching or something. Like what?
it was San Antonio. So it was like pretty
Oh,
pretty urban. So
okay,
nothing
okay.
nothing too dramatic. I mean, it is very Texas, just in a very 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 different way. Yeah. Um, uh, did you like have someone in your life that kind of like pushed you towards like painting? Was it like was it self directed? Who were like the people along the way who kind of encouraged you like in your practice?
It was mostly self-directed. Like my mother kind of put me on the path of like extreme love of knowledge. Like she bought a Mac for my brother and I when we were like 6. And for context, my mom was dying of HIV related illnesses at the time in like 94. So it
Okay.
was like the average American didn't even have a computer. This is a really bizarre and amazing thing that she did. And now my brother and I both work in computers and computer
Yeah.
stuff. Um, but I think that's a really big component in my artistic life because I think about like there was this there was this Mac game called Flying Colors. You ever heard of that?
Mm, no.
I feel like you
No.
might find that. I'm gonna send it to you an image. It was like this
I'll
proto
have to look it up.
Photoshop thing where you could like you could basically make clip art, but also like these strange animations, like Garden of Edens and all kinds of strange
Yeah.
tableaus. You basically make like these tableaus, and I remember it had sound effects while you're painting, but stuff like that that were really sticky in my brain. But I'm pretty much self-directed. Like I don't
Yeah.
no one encouraged what I did. It was kind of like, oh, it's a cute thing that you do. And I also grew up a very strict Jehovah's Witness, so it was like all the stuff I wanted to draw was forbidden. You know, like I wanted to draw comics, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I can't draw people beating each other up and like Hulk and Spider-Man, so like it was kind of like shameful as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's yeah. You know, that period of like creative technology is like super interesting. Hypercard and Kid Pix and um, you know, a bunch of that stuff is super interesting because it was so new. You know, so you know, from a user interface standpoint, you're trying to experiment with like how do you teach people like how to make new things and clearly like a real touch point, I think, for also for like a generation of like interactive folks. You know, it was the first time you could like make something that you know clicked and it moved and you know led a lot of people to like HTML or designing
right.
games or other interactive experiences. So you know, I do wonder if you know like for kids growing up today, things like Roblox and Minecraft, and then on the other side of the spectrum, you know, Gen AI, like Sora stuff. I wonder, you know, those are not endpoints necessarily, right? Like those are not the places you want to stay, but they can be springboards for like something new. So it'll be interesting to see like 20 years from now, like what's the, you know, what's the what is the what, for those influenced by those types of things, what are going to be the things that they create, you know, 20,
I
30
can
years from now.
I think about this a lot too, and I can take a swing at this. I could be
Okay.
completely wrong, but and I'm trying not to be like old man yelling at cloud. I really try and be sympathetic
Yeah.
to what they're experiencing because they're like on a treadmill that's going at like 70 miles an hour or something. And but my guess is that identity and the avatar and perhaps how one is perceived and moves through virtual environments will be respected as art. The same way we have fashion, right? And like I love like shitting on Fortnite for having dudes like wanting to pay $15 to look like Thanos for 2 months.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's something there, right? Like you paid money to look like Thanos, and maybe to them it's like there's something there. One of these kids will be smart enough to tell us what that felt like for them. I don't think we're
Yeah.
there yet because
Yeah.
they're looking like Thanos or whatever, and they're 7 years old, but they're not able to get there yet. Tell us why that's you know what it even feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You think throughout like, you know, throughout like throughout our history, you had people paint portraits of you, right? That's a form of avatar building, right? In some context, like as a world building, as an act of, you know, as an act of constructing a self. And then you have, you know, then we have portraiture, or, you know, you have the ability to capture like more verisimilitude. And so now we're sort of maybe somewhere sort of like in between, where it's both like very real, but there's also like a projected self that's on these like avatars, and maybe that playing with the self is that's maybe that's what's interesting. I had a conversation with Carrie Chen, who's an artist, and did this work called on this work called Primavera. She's done a couple different works like in this vein, but like one called Temporal Portrait, another one called Primavera. In Temporal Portrait, she did like 24 different, you know, portraits of herself at different ages, and then
Oh right, I
used, you
saw.
know, a mixture of kind of different tools, mixture of some like Gen AI, you know, some the facial mapping stuff to kind of like get a sense of like, oh, if I could have all my selves, past, present, and future, sort of sit together. But she looks a lot like avatars as being like a center for her work. Like, you know, that uncanny valley is not a place to, it's not something to be avoided. It's like it's a discomfort that's meant to be sat in. And so, yeah, I think maybe there is something there about like something very nascent about like just experimenting like with your digital body in some kind of way, especially since nowadays like so much of like these fake selves like in Fortnite are really colliding with these real selves, you know, with camera technology. So there's something that's happening, I think, in terms of the way people like look at themselves, like look through themselves and at themselves, that I think will generate, I don't know, some really interesting avenues. I'm not sure where it will go, but like I think I think you're right that like the idea of the avatars being a site of creation is a playful self. That's something that will, encourage creation in the future. That tracks. That tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, well, let's talk about games. I mean, making the jump, you could be someone who's inspired by games, someone who just admires games in their free time. But you've been making the jump, the transition into like actually designing games.
Yeah.
What encouraged you to make that leap to decide that like you don't just want to be on the sidelines, you want to be you don't want to be in the
It's
stands, you want to be down the pit.
it's so different. Did I show you Hip Hop RPG? Because I feel like I told you I
Yeah,
was gonna.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, I looked at the stills on your website and whatnot,
okay,
but
got
yeah.
it. That was like I love games so much, clearly, and like Hip Hop RPG is like the first time I was like, I want to make a game, but I was like, let me make something that looks like a game. It's not a game.
Right.
It's a facsimile. It looks a
Oh,
lot
that's
like a playable.
interesting. Yeah,
And I
yeah, yeah.
and I remember my brother being like, you could do that and program that in Java, right? And this was like 11 years ago. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. Fuck that. It's too difficult. Fuck,
Yeah.
no way. And I had no coding. I just rejected it from my mind. And over the years, I think I just needed to mature more and realize that he was kind of right. There were IP issues with Hip Hop RPG, which is like the main reason I didn't want to do it. And I still think I was right, because it would have just been. It was also just yeah, it wouldn't have gone the way I. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm doing now is what I wanted to be doing, and Black Public Media, I will credit them with pushing me farther into this because I was signing up for this. They had this MIT sort of grant collaboration thing, and my proposal was. Did I tell you about the character select screen?
I don't think so, but maybe let's back up just for people who don't know. You want to tell me a little bit about Hip Hop RPG, like what that project was for you, and yeah, maybe a little bit more about like how it was an off ramp, or how there's a direct line between like your painting practice and like developing that.
Yeah, so Hip Hop RPG is one of the animations I put on Dom Sketchcast, which is my YouTube show, my YouTube channel, and it was 6 episode animated series about a video game that doesn't exist, Super Nintendo Final Fantasy VI style RPG, where a bunch of rappers are stuck in a post-apocalyptic world, starring Kendrick, Drake, Tyler the Creator, and a bunch of other people. Like, and they all had their very clear archetypes of
Yeah,
like, oh, fighter or like swordsman, healer. I made Drake like the white mage. It's like this is like I'm trying to be clever about like sort of their interaction. Interestingly enough, in the first episode, Drake heals Kendrick, which I haven't gone back to that, but it's kind of interesting, right? It's interesting because now looking at where they are now, it's like
yeah,
whoa.
yeah, yeah.
But these are the things I'd had to contend with if I were still doing that series. I'd
Right,
have to
right.
like change based on their real world actions.
Yeah,
But that
retcon
was
it. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So I did 6 episodes, never finished it because my scope creep out the
yeah,
ass, just like could not
yeah,
could not wrap it up. Um, yeah, that was Hip Hop RPG. It grew like this nice small community around it. I got these like really cool strange gigs from that, and I think it was a really important for me to make that to
yeah,
excuse me to make something of that scale that took a lot of thinking, directing, writing, production, audio, animation. Yeah, it was a really important thing that I made. So,
yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting with music, like in games, the lineage for games is like making your own music, and it has its own kind of distinct genealogy. Um, that like because games started in this place that was like 8-bit, um, encouraged a certain type of creativity in terms of trying to get sound, and you couldn't have realistic sound, and then you move into like the CD-ROM era, and then you can have realistic
yeah,
sound,
yeah,
but the direction is more towards this like often more like orchestral or like cinematic. Like the language of sound in games is often takes from like kind of more the kind of like the more of like the background music cinematic tradition.
wow,
And it's interesting that games for the most part don't use like real music, and with the exception of Grand Theft Auto, which I think has always been like really clever in terms of like using the radio as a mechanism to build out these environments and just having like incredible music direction. This guy Ivan Pavlovich, I think, is their music director, and they've won Grammys for like their music selection. And but like games don't really do a lot with like real world like music, which I always found like very very strange. Like there's always a impetus to hire a composer or work with someone to make all new music, as opposed to like it's some of its cost, obviously, like paying a composer versus like licensing something. But that, even so, I just, there's so much independent film, and there's, so much nutrition, so many directors, Scorsese, for example, or Tarantino, or like directors who lean so much on like using real music in their work. And you just like you don't see that in games at any scale. Even with like
In
smaller independent game creators, like they just don't, just music is not a place. So that's what interested me about the hip hop RPG side of things. Is like you can envision a world where where it's not just like was that there's like a Def Jam fighting game, but something that's like more like
yeah.
takes the world of hip hop, right, and like works music into it the way that Spike Lee worked hip hop into Do the Right Thing, or I just you could see that being a place where games could really do something interesting. So I feel like that game, like the work that you're doing is like gesturing at that possibility that like, oh, of course, if you have a game with Kendrick in it, like there should be Kendrick's music in it as well. Why doesn't
Yeah.
that exist? Like you're asking a lot of questions about like why doesn't this thing exist in the way that maybe it should. Um,
And I'm wondering what that even looks like. I feel like in Red Dead Redemption, like I'm wondering if you think it counts that they had D'Angelo do music for that, and there's stuff like there was good original music composed for that had like original instruments. I'm wondering, like, are you implying that, like, if you I watched one battle after another and read your article, and the Johnny Greenwood
yeah,
P.T. Anderson connection is
yeah,
just off the chart. What does that look like then, for like what would that look like in in games? Because I'm trying to imagine it too.
yeah. I mean, the direction that people go is like rhythm games, like Guitar
Hi-Fi Rush.
Hero. Oh, Hi-Fi Rush, right? Yeah, yeah. Hi-Fi Rush is like another one. I think I'm just like interested more in the idea that more games should simply like license songs for key sequences
Okay,
in the game.
okay, real,
Like,
real, gotcha. Okay, okay. I was thinking about like we hire Johnny Greenwood, and each step is okay. I see. Yeah, just regular.
I mean, I think both things
Gotcha.
both
Yeah.
things are true.
Okay.
Like I do think that like games have gotten really attached to people who've composed music for games. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like that's like saying that films should only work with people who compose music for films and not bring in like a Johnny Greenwood, right? Who's background with Radiohead, and like you can have a life as a musician that exists outside of like the scoring work that you do. And with games, it's like that just does not happen. You simply do not either see musicians who've established themselves like as musicians doing work for games, extremely rare. Nor do you see outside of like trailers, like game makers licensing music that fits into the universe of the thing that they're trying to create, the way that you see in like film or whatever. So I guess it's not just a cost issue, because you don't have to like you don't have to shoot the moon and try to get a Taylor Swift track or whatever. It doesn't have to be that deep. I just That music supervision capacity simply does not really exist in games the same way, unless it's a sports game, or
Yeah.
it's a Grand Theft Auto, right? It just, I don't know, game makers just don't really have a interest in music in that way. So anyway, a bit of a tangent, but
I love
um,
it because it's really important for what I'm trying to do. So like it's
yeah.
great to talk about this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, 100%. Yeah, it's like, look, I mean, you're not gonna be able to like sign a Kendrick track, but like, I don't know. I think there's just like so much crossover between like the work that you're doing and other. It's like this is what interests me about artists, that people who come to games from other medium, is that you're bringing a set of like a set of inspirations and a set of like creative desires that are different from someone who maybe was just like, oh, I've made games my whole life. I want to make things the way that they've been made, as opposed to like, oh,
Right.
wouldn't it? Yeah. Um, so with the 6 episodes, and then did you end up? Yeah. So with the 6 episodes, like what happened after you released them, and then like kind of you took a big step back and said like, okay,
Yeah.
like
It.
this seemed like too much.
Yeah. I think it just scope creep, and it just tapered off. It was. I think I was. I don't say this in a negative way. I don't think I was mature enough to. I hadn't scoped out the whole story. Like I didn't. I was like a baby writer, um, and now I'm learning how to finish my stories and things like that. But I don't
Yeah.
think I wasn't quite there yet. So it just tapered off. It's unfinished. It's like episode 6 kind of just leaves, and yeah,
Yeah.
they haven't finished the fight.
Um, well, let's talk about the new project that you're working on for the Haitian Revolution. Uh, Tell me, like, maybe like what do you think people don't understand about the Haitian Revolution? I think about in the context of like Reconstruction being like one of these stories that like Americans don't really understand. Um, and I don't know. I just tell me a little bit about like obviously aside from being like Haitian, but like I don't know, as a personal interest, what was it that you wanted to say about the Haitian Revolution? Why games as opposed to another your multidisciplinary, why
Yeah,
not approach it as a painter? Or yeah, tell me about like what was the interest in like wanting to explore making a game about the subject?
yeah. I Oh, right. So the back to the Black Public Media thing. My pitch to them was a character select screen where you played Marvel vs. Capcom 2, right?
Yeah, yes, at some point.
Right. So it's like that
Yeah, I'm
orb.
not good at it, but yeah,
Yeah, me neither. I don't think fighting games are that interesting, frankly.
yeah.
But
It's a very specific like people who are into them are really, 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 really into them. It's like it's a very, very specific, like it's a very yeah. Fighting games are a super interesting genre, just because to both understand and to play requires like a level of and to find joy in them requires like a level of like technical dexterity that also does not carry with you when you age. That's another thing too. You like actually like physically age out of like playing fighting games.
yeah. So
And
like
most games are not that way. But that those they
yeah.
definitely are.
And a 12-year-old could beat you at it, but this is tangent, but I will get back on topic. I'm more interested in a fighting game where it's like you play Charles Xavier and there's no physical punching and there's like two thinkers or two people
Yeah,
talking.
just like
Show me that. Yeah, show me
yeah,
that game where you have to just puzzle through. There's a game called like Pro Philosopher, something more like that. I think that's more
yeah,
interesting. But I had this idea for a character select screen where you basically look at 1790 or something like where the Haitian Revolution is about to pop off, and you're scrolling through different groups, racially, gender wise, like class wise, and it was almost like it was part entertainment but part like educational tool of like you see Toussaint, what are his stats? What does that say about him? You see Alexander like Pétion, like what does that say about him? Like I'm trying to teach about like the stratification of like how important skin color was in a different sort of way, like
right,
like in Saint-Domingue, which is just it still blows my mind having like they had something like 16 different racial classifications,
yeah,
so the colorism just rampant, very strange. Um, and so my executive producer Lisa Osborne was like, "You got to make this into a real game. Don't stop playing with it. Like, just it's time." And I was like, "Oh my god!" And she was right. It was like because it would have been cool. The character selection would have been cool, but like, what happens after you select them? And I
right,
didn't. I didn't think that far. So I wanted to. This is just classic stuff for me. Like it doesn't. The thing I want doesn't exist. The any first off a game that takes place during the Haitian Revolution. The only one is pretty much like by Ubisoft. It's a Assassin's Creed offshoot
right,
made
right,
by
right,
mostly white folks. I'm not knocking them, but
yeah,
that game is mostly shh,
yeah,
I'm gonna free slaves. Oh my god, psh, you freed the slaves. Blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? Rainbows, Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, Call of Duty. All right, that's what we're doing. Like okay, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
That
yeah.
happened, but like honestly, I ain't getting that game sold if I try to make that shit, and I'm not interested in it. Disco Elysium is like my favorite game. It's probably my top five. It's like I want games where you sit and think about stuff and talk and explore.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was thinking like,
I mean, at some level, it's interesting with Assassin's Creed because like it's almost like they did you a favor by like producing the game because now you're like relieved of
I
the
yeah, I
like you're relieved of the idea that like you don't have to like dwell in the idea of like, oh well, I guess I need to focus on the like the violent, the violent part of the
right,
revolution, which is why, which is like what Assassin's Creed does. You don't have to focus on that, and you can just be like, well, I'm not making a game at that scale anyway. That has been done. That has been done.
Yeah.
You can say whether or not, like, whether they did it the right way, or you could make notes. And I know that they try to be, historically, they bring in a lot of like historians. They try to make them like pretty accurate, but just by nature of that genre and the combat, you are now relieved of the idea. So now you can explore,
Yes.
like, you can explore other aspects of this thing, other aspects of this thing, in the way, in a way that, Thin Red Line, for example, or like, there are other, you see this in like in film and
Malik.
television, or you can explore
Yes.
something that is like this, but you can just look at it through a totally different lens. So I guess in some ways maybe you can, thank Ubisoft for
Yeah,
for saying
they
like, oh,
they
thank you, I don't have to make that game. I don't have to make that game.
yeah, because they pretty much took the low hanging fruit and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right, because physical violence is so easy in games. You know this, right?
Yeah.
That's the easiest thing is I blew someone's head off. Okay,
Yeah.
now I'm really interested in the I hesitate to even call this violence, but the conflicts that happen when let's say a person who's like formerly enslaved is like talking to someone of a different social status and has to pretend like he doesn't know something. Like, what does that dialogue tree look like for someone who's like, all right, if I don't say the right thing, this dude is gonna murder me. And
Yeah.
I don't,
Right.
I'm not interested in showing the murder. I'm interested in what does that dialogue tree look like. It's not just like I choose this one or that one or that one. Like I to try and do more with dialogue trees. I love dialogue and choice in games, and I feel like again, Disco Elysium did something super interesting with that, and that's what I'm most interested in, existing in that realm with Mindsinger. And like, I'm not. She has like zero strength and dexterity. She's a telepath, and she's a singer, and she can talk really well. And I'm being very. And this is Fabienne, the main character of the game. I'm being very deliberate about putting you in that character's mind, in
Yeah.
that POV, because going being the soldier is what most game developers will put you in.
Right. 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 Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where's the project right now? Tell me a little bit about like where you're at in the process, and yeah, how things are going. And
I'm glad you're asking because I was definitely going to email you. So we finished the R&D phase one. We got the vertical slice complete. It needs a lot of polish. Actually, it needs polish, not a lot of polish, and sort of rescoping with some of the narrative. I feel like there's some it needs some save the cat and like narrative changes, but I would say like the vertical slice is maybe 70% of the way there.
yeah.
The thing is playable. People have played it. It exists. I have a pitch deck, and yeah, we need to polish the vertical slice, add more to it. I think it needs conflict, tension, stuff, all the stuff I know about that makes stories work. I think we need to
Yeah.
push that more because it's a narrative driven game, right? So if the words aren't inspiring you to ask questions and move forward, I feel like we just haven't done it yet. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where
I mean, I think, we're at a stage now also. I mean, games are so nascent in terms of like exploring other elements of like the, diasporic experience, like you just, we're starting to get more of that in film, things like Sinners, for example. I'm
yeah,
very hopeful about like what comes next. And there's obviously so much like pathfinding that's been done, in a medium like film, from, Watermelon One to Spike Lee's work to, from Charles Burnett. Like there's obviously like a long history of, diasporic filmmakers pushing, Oscar Michaud. Like there's so many people who've contributed to this like present moment. And I feel like, with games, there's just like none of that lineage. So in some ways that's exciting, but it's also frustrating, right? Like
yeah,
you don't have like an OG, like there's not someone that you can tap that's like, oh yeah, this person's been working in games for, 40 years and can provide like guidance and wisdom. And so, in some ways you're like laying foundational work that other people will walk into, which is exciting. But I suspect it's also like very hard and frustrating too, in terms of wanting to find community and other people who are making games, making games that are like this.
Yeah, I mean, I've found like game devs of color has been awesome. That community is just great. I met so many people there. And we're I mean, this generation is like stuff's happening, and I feel like we're all just kind of trying to make stuff happen. But yeah, it's I got a little terrified just now when you were saying that. I was like, yeah, it is. It's kind of me, like in this in this place. I'm like, okay, and I have this awesome team, and we're like, okay, we're gonna do this thing, and I know what I know in my spirit is like I'm I'm trying to come at this somewhere in between like Donald Glover and David Lynch, and I'm like, that's what I have for y'all. Someone else
Yeah,
is probably gonna come at this from a more like traditional, like palatable for a wider audience thing, but like this is what I have, and this is
yeah,
how I'm able to. This is my entry point even into Haitian history. Is like I've been doing so much research, and this is part of my. I don't know if I told you about my book, but I'm like writing all these. My book should be coming out in early January, but like that's how I that's my entry point. That's how I stay interested in it. Because frankly, like the reality of this stuff is like to depict it is like it's 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 miserable in so many ways.
yeah,
It's like I just I can't do that. And I
yeah,
don't.
yeah,
It's funny like being black sometimes when you're just sort of like just to make stuff that is historically accurate is you feel like this, ugh. Like you think of something like Amistad or Roots,
right,
and it's
right,
like I
right.
don't think I ask myself this all the time. Does this work in games? Does this where does this lineage fit in games? And why or why not, right? I play this game with myself, and on the flip side, I'm like, okay, well, how many games have I played about a samurai? You know what I mean? Like what's or a fiefdom in ancient Europe somewhere, and I'm like, okay, well then why is this one uncomfortable and why would this not work? And I feel like we're in this. It's hard to describe this age we're in, and it's also hard to not to. I live in the DC area. It's hard not to talk about that in
Yeah,
relationship
yeah,
to this,
yeah,
but we're in this ecosystem. This is all kind of being affected by our political situation. I think I'm one of those people who thinks everything is political, but um, it's like a care and when you're dealing with any material like this, it's not like just working with samurai stuff. It's like we're
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
this is uh I'm walking on ice. I know that. It's like you have to
yeah,
make these
yeah,
deliberate choices for how the audience will see it. Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? I know I'm kind of
Yeah,
all over
yeah,
the
yeah. No, no, I think that's true. I mean, I think some of it is I mentioned Reconstruction just because like that's just like an era in American history that Americans understand very poorly, like in general, is a really crucial time period. And I guess I feel that way about the Haitian Revolution in the sense that like, people know or they have ideas about what they think Haiti is like now and today. And you have to kind of like look at this like longer like lineage and the
Jamie, you
extent
cut